Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Al-Azouzi from easymedicaldevice.com. And today we'll try to help you understand some kind of great misunderstanding that is happening now. It's mainly about this extension of the EU MDR. I have a lot of customers that comes to me with a lot of questions, and we decided to have mainly a discussion about or clarification about what is happening, what you have the rights to do, not the rights to do, etc., and this and that. So I have a guest with me, so Florian Tolkmitt, which will be helping us to understand that. So Florian, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Well, thanks you, Munir, for inviting me. And you asked me to introduce myself a bit. So I'm a biomedical engineer from background, worked in medical device development for a couple of years. And then I started working on the paperwork because my ex-boss wanted to focus on inventing new devices and did not like paperwork. And I said, well, I think it's kind of cool. So I started with risk management and with clinical evaluation. And from there, got into the mode of setting up complete technical documentations for the devices that we made, and then switched into the service providing world for a regulatory affairs service provider, which I really liked. And yeah, ever since I'm actually working in regulatory affairs, clinical affairs, also switched sides to work for a medical device manufacturer for some years, but realized that I'm more the service providing type of person. So I came back into consulting. And a few years ago, I founded PRO-LIANCE with my co-founder, Thomas. And we're a team of 20 people now, helping manufacturers with clinical affairs, regulatory affairs, and quality management topics. And apart from that, because I like networking so much, I'm chair of the REPS Germany chapter, which is a subsidiary of REPS, which most people probably know, the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. And I'm also assistant professor teaching a master's class at the University of Applied Sciences in Luebeck, Germany, on the topic of clinical evaluation.
Great. So I think, this is great to have you on this podcast to help us on this situation. As you are also a service provider, so you are helping customers, and maybe you have also a lot of those questions that we are receiving about this EU MDR extension. But mainly, just to start and to put, if I can say, the topic really in the middle here of the discussion, we call this podcast the Great Misunderstanding of the EU MDR. So what is this great misunderstanding, or what's the thing that mainly is popping up too much with customers so that they don't really understand what is this extension here?
Yeah, I mean, I like to call it the Great Misunderstanding of the MDR amendment, because I think when the first discussions started about the MDR amendment late last year, so in 2022, everyone right away had the feeling, hey, we're going to get more time. And not only the notified bodies, but mainly the manufacturers. And I think because there was no very clear communication, besides the process of drafting the MDR amendment and then going through all the necessary legal steps until it was published in March, I think this perception that, hey, we're going to get more time was really branded, and everyone still has this feeling, or at least many, many people still have that feeling. And that's actually not true. That is the misunderstanding. The MDR amendment was made in order to get relief in the system, and the relief is focused on notified body capacity. There was a survey published by Team NB, which showed that the large majority of certificates are the MDD certificates are still valid until the end of the previous transition period, so until May 2024. And many manufacturers were really waiting until the last minute to do the switch from MDD to MDR. And that was simply not possible with the available notified body capacity. So the intention of the MDR amendment is to give more time to notified bodies to evenly distribute the switch of MDD certificates to MDR certificates. And yeah, the misunderstanding that from my point of view is still there, that also manufacturers have more time to do all the preparation work that is necessary for them to do the transition. And that is simply not true. They really have to put the foot on the gas or not release at all, and continue to do everything possible to achieve a smooth transition, so that the notified bodies in the end will have sufficient time and will be able to distribute all the different transitions of all devices. Because if they don't do that, then we have another wave and another crunch at the end of the new transition time. And the notified bodies will have the same problem. So this should be avoided.
Yeah, and I mean, we can also understand some of those manufacturers say, oh, we have now more time, so let's remove this priority and work on another priority and this and that. And we see that also a lot as I'm also a service provider and get some customers. We see that with a lot of manufacturers saying, oh, we have time now, so let's postpone the project, or let's move forward on this, or let's not focus on that for the moment. We'll contact you again when we'll be needing you, this kind of thing. So, which is understandable in terms of business activities to say, okay, we still have until 2027 or 2028. But yeah, there are some conditions now. It's not like before under when we had those extensions, we say, okay, here is the new date for the extension. Mm-hmm. Now it's like here is the new date, but you can go to this new date under certain conditions here. So who can benefit from this extension then? Which company are eligible to get this extension?
Yeah, it's actually all those companies that have legacy devices that want to transfer to MDR. So this is the main general condition. Of course, there are more that we're going to talk about, but also these companies have to have had a valid MDD certificate in place, or I mean, I'm also including the AI MDD, of course. And that certificate had to be valid at the publication date of the MDR amendment. So that was on March 20th, 2023. Or if it was not valid anymore, then they needed at that point in time an agreement with a notified body already in place that was saying, okay, we are going to transition with the timeline that we're going to talk about as well. Or they needed a declaration from a competent authority according to Article 59 or 97, but I think Article 59 is more likely, which focuses on those devices that are really, I would say, desperately needed. And if they would not be there, we would have a problem as European population. And that article was used a lot during Corona because we needed certain medical devices quickly to be available for everyone in Europe. That's where they used it a lot. But now it's also possible to apply this and have a derogation, actually confirmed by a competent authority.
Exactly.
So basically, as I said, legacy devices, that is the main topic, and then a valid certificate in place is the second necessary point.
So as you mentioned also, there is some devices that even if they don't have a certificate valid, there are some competent authorities that can approve them. It's like competent authorities acting as notified bodies while you are transitioning at the same moment. But as you said also, it's mainly for life-sustaining device for exactly. 59. But we have the Article 97, which is more for any other device. And you have like also some conditions for that. I have a few customers that were asking me to help them on these ones. But there are a big list of conditions also. So it's not like you can just go through that easily.
Exactly.
In terms of timeline now, okay, we the previous date or the previous MDR date was May 26, 2024. As we said, a lot of manufacturers had their certificate going until that date. So it means that we had a huge wave to handle. Now, what are the new dates now for those medical devices here?
There's actually quite a few dates that we all have to keep in our heads now. And I think if we mention all of the different dates for all of the different devices, it will be quite confusing. But let's stick to just a few ones. And I would say we start with the most important ones, or with those that are actually applicable to most manufacturers. And that would be for class 3 and 2B implants. So the prolongation of the transition period will be possible until December or end of December 2027. And for all other devices where a notified body is involved, it will be end of December 2028. But that's only the prolongation of the transition period. And that is only possible if the manufacturer and the notified body together comply with certain conditions that we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
And then there's, for example, different devices that, is only for a small group of manufacturers, I would say. And I would like to point out the custom-made 3D implants. So they have a different transition period, and that ends in May 2026. And then the third category, so to say, would be the Annex 16 devices or Annex 16 products. So those without medical intended purpose. And the main intention between, or the main intention of the transition periods here is not part of the MDR amendment, but it's part of a common specification that was released end of 2022. Or in the middle of 2022, sorry. And the intention of these transition timelines is to put the manufacturers in the position to have enough time to generate additional clinical data if it is needed in order to go through conformity assessment. So the main idea is that there are consecutive dates. First date for them, if they need to perform a clinical investigation, would be June 2024. And they need to file an application with their local competent authority that they want to do clinical investigation. Then the next date would be they have started the clinical investigation.
Yeah.
It would be end of December 2024. Next step would be that they agree with the notified body to go into conformity assessment. That's end of 2020 or mid of 2026. And then they need to have the conformity assessment finished until June 2028. So it's really a consecutive flow of different things that has to be followed. And only if they comply with each step, one after another, they are able to continue to sell the devices with the MDD certificate in place. If they stop in between, for example, if they started with clinical investigation, but they don't finish it, then the whole thing should be stopped and they will not be able to continue to sell the devices anymore.
Exactly. And this is the change from the previous, if I can say, mentality on extensions. Before it was just, oh, here is the date now, the final date. Now they put in place some milestones in the middle so that if you are not meeting those milestones, you cannot benefit from this extension. And then which is obliging those manufacturers to do that. And for example, for this extension of EU MDR for the normal devices, we said also that there are some conditions for that. So it's not like yes, my product is a class 2A, so I can go until 2028, December 2028. No, there are some conditions in the middle so that you can benefit from this thing also.
Yeah, actually, it's quite interesting. If we look back to Annex 16 devices just for 1 second, the common specification was released long before, well, not
Yeah,
that long, but long
exactly.
before the MDR amendment. And they already had this milestone approach
Exactly.
in there. And now we have the MDR amendment and we also have the milestones in there. And as you mentioned, certain conditions. And there's actually a list of these conditions in the MDR amendment. And yeah, a few things that need to be pointed out is, for example, that the manufacturer needs to have the QMS MDR ready by May 2024. So that's actually less than 1 year from now.
Yeah,
And if a manufacturer wants to make use of the prolonged transition time, then they have to have the QMS ready, MDR ready by next year. So there's no time to wait. That's really important. And then also by the same date, so by May 2024, they need to have lodged a formal application for MDR transition with their devices. And then they have 6 months to negotiate a contract with the notified body. And until 26th of September 2024, the contract needs to be signed. And
exactly.
if that doesn't happen, then of course, the milestone was not achieved, and then the prolongation of the timeline is not possible. And from the perspective that this is only a bit more than a year from now until the contract has to be signed, and there's also another condition, which is manufacturer and notified body need to agree on a schedule for submission of the corresponding technical documentation for all the devices that need to be transitioned to MDR. And of course, this negotiation of the contract and review of the formal application, all this takes time, and the notified bodies, at least from what I have heard, are already fearing that in the period between May and September 2024, they will be very busy doing all these administrative things, checking the applications, negotiating contracts. And I've heard that the notified bodies expect that for one customer, they probably need between 2 and 5 days for all this administrative things and setting up the contract. And they are kind of fearing that there will be no time for other things like performing conformity assessment, like doing audits, which of course they also have to do because there's no time, no extra time that they get, and they have to do their daily business as well. So this will be very tight. And I can only recommend to manufacturers not to wait until May 2024 to submit the application to the notified body, because it might be that then it's already too late, even though this is the legally binding date. But I mean, what are you going to do if the notified bodies are overloaded with applications at a certain day and they are simply not able to handle it anymore? So don't wait. That's my
Exactly.
advice here.
Exactly. And one thing that you've said, which is interesting also, is so we discussed about those timings until until December 2027, December 2028 for some products. Here, this doesn't depend on the manufacturer; it depends on the notified body. So, which means that when you will do the application, they will give you the schedule. As you said, you will negotiate with them. But the idea for them, as you said, is to evenly put all the application within this period. So it means that maybe your application, as soon as you register that, the schedule will be for 2026 already or 2025 already. And you have, I suppose, no choice. It's not like, I mean, as you say, it's a negotiation, so you can negotiate, but there will be no real choice. So this is also the danger for people to have in mind those 2028, 2027 dates when it's not really on their hand, it's on the hand of the notified body.
Well, actually, it's supposed to be in the hands of the manufacturers. So they are the ones that have to come up with a schedule for submission, and they have to provide that schedule to the notified body together with a formal application. And then, as you correctly said, it needs to be negotiated. And what will not happen is that the notified bodies will accept schedules from all different manufacturers that foresee submission of all technical files in 2027 and 28. Because that's simply impossible. And to coordinate all of this between the different manufacturers, so the customers of the notified bodies, this is a lot of administrative work that the notified bodies have to cope with that was not there before, and that is a new burden that was put on them by the MDR amendment, actually. And that's why I was saying that they are kind of fearing that they will have a lot to do with organizational tasks. Of course, different notified bodies operate differently, no doubt about that. And I'm sure that probably the bigger one will have less issues with that than the smaller ones, but there are also many smaller ones. And yeah, we will see how they are able to cope with that. And as you also correctly said, it's really important to come up with realistic schedules, because what happens if a manufacturer, plans to submit technical documentation at a certain point in time, let's say January 2025, and then they don't have the capacity to update their technical documentation in time, and then the submission date is there and they cannot submit, but the notified body has planned the review already, then everything gets mixed up and messed up. Maybe they will make other customers happy because they have time for a review of a different technical documentation a bit earlier. But this also costs administrative time again, because they have to reorganize and things like that. So it's really important that the schedules are realistic on the one hand side for manufacturers, but then also adhere to, so that the notified body can then really do the review when it was planned.
Hey, just a second. Do you need a EU, Swiss or UK representative? Then choose Easy Medical Device. We can represent you and also become your importer. Contact us at eo@easymedicaldevice.com. Exactly. And one thing, and you have maybe also this experience with some manufacturers, we have submitted a lot of applications with a lot of technical files, etc. And it's never, if I can say, it's never straightforward. If I can say so, there is always some questions from notified bodies which ask us to modify something or are not agreeing on, for example, equivalent devices for clinical, etc. So those kind of things. So it's not like a straightforward system where application where you submit and then you just receive your certificate at the end and it's all fine. No, there are always some milestones that can be triggered and which can extend also this review. As it says also on the EU MDR, you have 3 times the possibility to have a question and answer from the notified body also. So it's more like it can be 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, but at the end it's like maybe 3 months between each question and answer, so which makes it like nearly 9 months or nearly 1 year at the end. So you should not think that, oh, now that you applied, everything is finished. No, I have still customers that we are still 1 year now. We are still on the question and answer with the notified body 1 year after the first application. So this is also something that it's why when you said a realistic schedule, it's also in the fact to say that you should not submit at the end your application, because you have to have some time for reviewing, some time for questions, some time for corrections. And also your certificate will not be available immediately after the approval. It will be available maybe 3 or 4 months after, or even 6 months sometimes for some customers, so that they are printing the certificate and providing that to you, etc. So this is really something that people have to take into account also, and not thinking that, yeah, it will be really easy just as soon as you are applying to the notified body.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you count backwards from, let's say, 2027, and we know from experience from the different notified bodies that they are saying approximately a conformity assessment or technical file review takes between 12 and 18 months. You can subtract that from end of 2027, and then it's already mid of 2025 when the submission has to be made and the review can start, including all those review rounds that you mentioned and a bit of back and forth and the issuance of the certificate in the end. And mid of 2025, I mean, it still feels like it's some time away, but it's not so much anymore. And if a manufacturer has more than one product, of course, they cannot expect that they submit all the products at once. I mean, apart from that being not practical on the manufacturer side as well, because probably they don't have so many resources available that they can finish all the technical documentations for all products at the same time, but it's more a sequence. So having or taking this into account, that the notified body conformity assessment takes time, the certificate, and the getting ready the technical documentation on the manufacturer side, you always have to count backwards. And then actually, if you do that, you realize that, hey, actually tomorrow I have to be ready.
Exactly,
So
you
there's
are already late.
not that much time anymore.
Exactly. No, no, if you do this exercise, maybe as I said, if you have a lot of products, maybe you are already late now. So
Exactly,
it's that
yes.
thing.
Yeah.
When you say about technical file, one of the questions that we had a lot also is the fact that when you are applying for to a notified body for your dossier and everything, some people say, "Oh, but I'm not ready now, so I should not apply now. I don't have a technical file. I don't have a quality management system ready,
Mhm.
etc." So, what is your advice on that?
Well, there was a bit of discussion during the negotiation of the MDR amendment. So there were notified bodies that were saying, well, if we accept that manufacturer sends the application without the technical documentation already MDR ready, then at the point in time where we start with the review, we sometimes really see big surprises and the technical documentation is not really ready and we have to reject it. So these notified bodies, they would have liked that with the application, manufacturers also hand in the complete technical documentation already. But then in not in the MDR amendment, but the corresponding Q&A document from the EU Commission, it's clearly stated now that the technical documentation does not need to be ready and will not be reviewed at the time of application. And that gives more time to manufacturers, so they only have to have a schedule in place when they will have the technical documentation ready. And as said before, that schedule has to be agreed upon with the notified body and not everything at the end of the transition timeline. But it's sufficient to have the planning ready. And I mean, one argument that absolutely speaks for this way of doing it is that if the application is lodged by May 2024, and then, for example, the submission date is in January 2026, a lot can have happened in between. And if, then the technical documentation, of course, needs to be updated again. And if they would have submitted it together with the application, then of course it would have been absolutely outdated, and that doesn't make sense. So my suggestion is to work on getting technical documentation MDR ready and then keeping it up to date until the submission date, and not wait until the submission date to get it ready.
Exactly.
So I think work in the direction, and then you're going to be fine. But as you said, and from that perspective, I can actually understand some manufacturers where they say, okay, we have a bit more time, but it's not so much. It's not so much.
Exactly. And one thing that is also important is so Team NB is really also an association from notified body and really helping to harmonize this communication and really helping on the discussion about how notified body should do things. For people also that want to see that, so when you go to the Team NB website, there are also some guidances on that. There is also a guidance on technical file for IVDR and MDR, how to do that. So it's also something that maybe can be helpful for you on what is expected by notified bodies within each chapter of the MDR. It's just examples, so it's not like it's not fitting all products. It's examples so that you have a kind of an understanding on that. Team NB has also issued a template of a letter.
Mm-hmm.
Letter for notified bodies to confirm that the manufacturers are able to to extend their products with the EU MDR. We had a discussion on that just before recording this podcast. So I had some customers that were asking me, "Oh, my certificate is expiring soon, but my notified body is not ready to sign this letter, or it has too much workload to sign the letter. So I will never have this letter available by this date. Should I stop to sell my product by the end of my certification, or this and that?" So what would you say to them then?
Well, I would say no, it's not mandatory to have such a letter in place. The main intention of this letter was actually to provide evidence to manufacturers that they are still able to market their devices, even though the certificate says it's not okay anymore, because the certificate has a validity date usually, right? So and that will end at some point in time. And together with this confirmation letter, that's the evidence that manufacturers can use, because notified bodies are not able to change MDD certificates anymore. That's absolutely a no-go. But they can make it's like an amendment or an annex to it, and that would be this kind of confirmation letter. And from what I understood, it was actually initiated by the Notified Body Coordination Group, which is like something comparable to MDCG. So it was not from Team NB, but Team NB is also linking to this document. And of course, telling all Team NB members to use this confirmation letter.
But if you don't have this confirmation letter, you can continue to sell your product. It's not mandatory to have that.
From my point of view, yes, absolutely. So it's nowhere in the MDR amendment that you need such confirmation letter. And if I interpret the European Commission Q&A about the MDR amendment, there they talk about this, that it would be helpful to have that, especially if you want to bring your product to other countries where, for example, free sale certificate together with CE mark is accepted. And these countries might not understand why the product can still be marketed without a valid certificate. And then this confirmation letter is supposed to help.
Okay. So for the ones that are listening to us, so don't, be feared to continue to sell your products. If you are, as we said also, we have mentioned a lot of conditions. If you are meeting all the requirements, all the conditions that we have described here, automatically, normally, your certificate is extended. You can, it's what I'm advising some of my customers, you can create a small dossier, if I can say, for that, to show all the evidences that you are meeting all those criteria. So to show that to anybody that is really looking for that. It can be like a self declaration or self-review of that. But normally, and as Florian said, automatically you are extended as soon as you are meeting all the requirements that are mentioned on the letter, on the amendment.
We are all quality and regulatory people, right? And we know you need evidence for everything. So document it. You can do it on your own, or you document it with that confirmation letter, and that's it.
Exactly. Okay, Florian, I think we covered all the topics of today. So can we try to just make a summary maybe for what we said today? So how will you summarize all that now?
Yeah, of course. I can try. And I think there's just a few things that everyone should keep in mind. So time is running, the clock is ticking. Just keep the foot on the gas pedal and don't start to brake now. Don't relax, but continue. And the few steps that need to be taken from my point of view is, first of all, get the QMS MDR ready, and don't wait with that, because actually for the MDD products, the post-market surveillance requirements and vigilance requirements, they should have been in place already. And if you don't have that, then you're really actually making a mistake. So this is absolutely a requirement for May next year when you hand in your application, but hand it in earlier, I would say. Then next thing is identify gaps in your technical documentation. So really check your technical documentation if it is MDR compatible or not. And if it was MDD compatible, it doesn't mean that it's also compliant with MDR. We're experiencing that again and again, that people say, hey, we've had our MDD technical documentation and we just take that and say, this is MDR compliant now, but that's not working. So you need to invest time. Then if you have done that, you have an overview of all the things that need to be done, and you can come up with a plan for closure of all these gaps. And based on that, you can calculate how much time, how much resources you will need, and you can come up with a realistic schedule from your point of view, what will be possible in order to close the gaps and have all your technical documentations MDR ready. And then with that plan in place, you are able to submit your application for MDR transition to the notified body and do that as early as possible. Don't wait until May next year. Then get the contract with your notified body in place. And in parallel, of course, already start working on closing all the gaps in the technical documentation. And by the time your submission date comes up, have everything ready, submit it to the notified body. And really, I would recommend stick to the Team NB recommendation for technical documentation, because this is how they see technical documentation. This is what they expect.
Exactly.
And if you have closed all gaps and submitted, or even if you have closed all gaps and the submission date is still, I don't know, maybe a few months ahead of time or a year ahead of time, don't forget to keep updating your technical documentation, because it's a living thing. It's not something that you do once and then leave it alone forever. So keep on updating it.
And even after, you need to keep it updated always. So because we have under MDD, we had a lot of technical files that were still the same. But now there are so many documents that are inside that should be updated, like clinical evaluation, post-marketing surveillance, etc. It should be inside your technical file. So yeah, if there are any changes to the document, you have again to update your technical file. So it's important there.
Right.
Great. So thank you, Florian, for that. Great summary. So I hope it's helpful. So for the audience, how can you help the audience? What is exactly the activities why should they contact you specifically?
Well, actually, as I said in the beginning, I'm a co-founder of a consultancy. So what we do is we help many manufacturers with clinical evaluation and related topics. And into that counts also risk management, post-market surveillance, post-market clinical follow-up, biological safety. So all the bits and pieces that are necessary for the technical documentation and to get that MDR ready. And of course, we have experiences with quality management, and if a manufacturer needs help to understand what is necessary to get the quality management system MDR ready until in about 1 year, we are also able to help there. But yeah, the main focus, I would say, is all the topics, all the bits and pieces that are necessary to make the technical documentation MDR ready. And if someone has trouble with planning, I mean, it's not that easy for some people, I always realize. Of course, we have seen many good examples of how planning can be done. We are also willing to help with that in order to really have a good plan in place that is realistic and that's justifiable when talking to a notified body.
Great. No, really interesting here. And one thing that you asked me also that we talk about is mainly about networking, if I can say. So what should we say about that also?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a bit fan of networking, and
Okay.
as I mentioned in the introduction as well, I really think that we need to network and we need to exchange experience and knowledge across company borders, and even better also with people from notified bodies, from authorities, from consultancies, and so on and so forth. And I'm very engaged in REPS. I'm actually chair of the REPS Germany chapter. And we're trying to bring people together in local networking events just to have maybe a beer together or eat together and talk about regulatory challenges. And sometimes we really have that mix of people in these events. And I think that is very, very valuable when you can talk to people and not be in the situation, hey, I cannot consult and things like that. But it's an informal way of speaking with each other.
Exactly.
And that, of course, can also happen at conferences, at trainings, and so on and so forth. So I really encourage everyone to do as much of networking as possible. And yeah, maybe I can recommend one event that's my personal favorite, and that's the Reps Euro Convergence. Actually, it just passed in May, just a few weeks ago. It took place in Amsterdam. The next one will be in May 2024 in Berlin.
Okay.
And there's also international, or the Reps convergence that always takes place, I think, in September or October in the US or Canada this year. So Reps is a very good resource for people to network.
Yeah, and I remember the first time I met you was at Medica,
Right.
2019, if I remember, or something like that. So it was
Yeah.
even before COVID, because after COVID, I didn't went back to Medica. But yeah, we met there. So yeah, it's always important to meet people. And as you've said, also, there are a lot of interpretation of the regulations. So it's good also to meet to understand what people are thinking or what is their opinion on this kind of thing. So which is also a great understanding there. Great. So thank you. Florian. So Florian, I have placed all the links, nearly, I hope I have placed all the links of what we discussed today on the show notes. So about the EU MDR extension, the notified body confirmation letter, also the details of Florian and the PRO-LIANCE. So don't hesitate to go on the show notes to see all that. And if you have any questions, and you can contact directly Florian or myself if you have some comments or still some misunderstanding about what we said today. Okay, Florian, so thank you. It was really a pleasure to have you today. And I hope, yeah, this will be helping a lot of the people that are listening to avoid those misunderstandings and to also keep having some good practices on the submission of the technical documentation to the notified bodies then. Okay, Florian, so it was really a pleasure. Thank you, and I wish you a nice day.
I thank you too. And I hope everyone is waking up and not waiting until
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.